Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching NDTV. Stacks of cash in a judge's house. A shameful comment by a judge blaming a rape victim for the crime against her. And the Supreme Court pulling up governors for overreach. Now, the Indian judiciary has made headlines for all the wrong and some right reasons in the past few days. But beyond the noise, how fair, fast and inclusive is the Indian justice system? That's what we look at today. The 2025 India Justice Report pulls no punches, exposing both positives and persistent problems in our courts. Southern states are leading the charge, with Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana topping the charts for judicial performance, while Karnataka in fact is the only state hitting diversity quotas in both police and judiciary. But that is the exception and not the rule. India has only 15 judges per million people, and when we should be ideally having about 50 of them. This is disappointing. In fact, high courts run on one third of required strength, and district judges, what the report says, are buried under a mountain of pending cases. In fact, over 2,000 each cases on average, and in places like Allahabad and Madhya Pradesh, that number even touches a staggering 15,000 cases per judge. In fact, this shortage hits the vulnerable the hardest. Today, nearly 3/4 of India's prison population are under trials, which is also very disappointing because people are not yet convinced, just waiting often for years, and that number has only grown in the last 10 years. From 66%, like you can see in the visuals there, to 76% in just 10 years. And while there's some good news too, more women are now sitting on the bench. Just 14% of High Court judges are women. Currently, there's just one female Chief Justice across 25 high courts across the country. So yes, the system is moving, but not fast, not fairly enough. Justice in India still remains a long wait for far too many people, and it's not just about judges anymore. It's about better systems, greater inclusivity, fairness and justice, and the political will, most importantly, to back what it takes to get us there. To talk about all of this, we have with us Vikas Singh, who is former Additional Solicitor General of India, former President of the Supreme Court Bar Association. He's also Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court. Thank you, Mr. Singh, for joining us on NDTV. My first question to you, sir. The report says that India has only 15 judges per million people, far below the recommended number. What implications does this have on access to timely justice? In some ways, have high vacancy rates and increasing caseloads affected the efficiency of high courts and district courts across the country?
So there is a positive and there is a negative in this. The positive is that if you look at the disposal per judge of cases in this country, you will find out that globally, our judges are disposing far more number of cases that are being disposed by the other judges, where the judge population ratio is much better. So that's the positive part. The negative is that because of the poor ratio of judge to people, the pendency, in spite of our judges doing a higher disposal, the pendency is going up. And that is something which is very disturbing because it strikes at the very confidence or I would say, the fundamentals of democracy. If people don't get access to justice or speedy justice, it's somewhere, it erodes the confidence of the people in the rule of law. And that is something which is, it's a very negative, and I think that needs to be addressed at the earliest.
Right. So but Mr. Singh, also if you look at the factors that contribute to states like Uttar Pradesh and West Bengal ranking lowest in the justice delivery system, what do you think are the factors for the southern states doing better? What kind of reform should we be looking at in almost all the states now?
So I have not examined the data, but I'm sure the budget which the southern states must be giving for the justice delivery would be definitely better than the budget that these other states are giving. That is one. The second would be that the number of vacancies that are remaining in these states which are lagging behind would be far higher even in the lower judiciary as well as higher judiciary than these southern states. And there I'm sure they must be taking more proactive steps to fill up the vacancies. So if you see these two factors, I think these two factors would be largely responsible for, faster disposal of cases in the southern states as compared to the other states. And also the report which is about this justice, which has been shared with me, even the policing has, the number of policemen per vis-a-vis the population also is lacking in these states where justice, slower dispensation of justice is happening. So that also ultimately affects the justice delivery system, because as far as criminal justice is concerned, police play a very important role in, the criminal justice of this country. And most of the numbers, if you see, would be, like for instance, I know Bihar. Bihar has large number of these excise cases which are clogging the justice delivery system by virtue of, these small offences of people bootlegging, etc.
Right.
Happening in the state, and that really is taking away the large amount of judicial time, and because of which the other matters are getting neglected. So these are all fundamental issues which need to be addressed state by state,
right,
to ensure that the system gets better.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Singh, for joining us on NDTV. Also joining us now is Valay Singh, who's a lead co-founder of India Justice Report. We have Swapna Sundar, lawyer, Madras High Court, and we also have L. Ravichandar, senior advocate, Telangana and Andhra High Court. Thank you all of you for joining me on this broadcast. Valay, to you first. The India Justice Report 2025 reveals some serious challenges in the country's legal and policing systems. And thank you so much, because it's been quite a learning experience for all of us to know how these systems are working across the country and what really is not working about them. But what strategies do you think have really helped southern states like Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh top the rankings? Also help us understand, why does the state of West Bengal consistently perform poorly in multiple pillars of justice, including policing and legal aid? Clearly, there are some things that are working for the southern states which clearly are absent in some of the other states.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Vasudha, for having me here. And thank you for talking about this issue of capacity. What the India Justice Report essentially does is use government data to measure capacity, to look at the supply side of the justice system as a whole. And we also don't look at it in a siloed way. We look at it in a comprehensive way across the four pillars, plus the state human rights commissions, of course. So, coming to the question that you are asking, southern states do better on a whole host of other indices as well, as you know. So governance overall, multiple reports over the years have shown that the southern states are doing better on those indices. And somewhere down the line, I think we have to look at governance as a whole and see the reasons for better performance of southern states. But coming to specifically in this edition of the Justice Report, we have to say that the vacancies are generally much lower in the southern states, as Mr. Vikas Singh was saying. The diversity is a big theme across. A diverse justice system is necessary for a democracy like India. And there too, as you said, Karnataka is the only state that meets the SC, ST, OBC quotas in police as well as in judiciary as per the data that is available. Now, on that, by scoring high on that, Karnataka has maintained this top position. Also, the budget spending, yes, I mean, southern states are considered and do have per capita incomes on average higher than the rest of the country. So all of these things play a big role. However, I think it is also about the planning and the continuous sort of monitoring of the need of the system, and then then how do you fill that, and how do you sanction posts, and how do you fill them?
Right.
So far as West Bengal is concerned, I think the state has a lot of gaps to fill, and unless something disruptive is done, incrementally at the current rates, it would be very difficult to improve, and that is true for other states, West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, there are other states as well.
Okay. Well, I say before I go to the other panelists, there was one thing that I found was personally very disturbing, is this rise in under trial prisoners from 66% to 76%. What does this say about the pace and fairness of legal processes in India? Because do you think by improving legal aid, we can reduce the under trial population? Because it just seems like a whole lot of people are under trials, they are, languishing in jail, they probably don't even have access to legal aid. And is this also probably the right time to explore alternatives to incarceration, looking at options like community service, which are present in the West, to in some ways ease the pressure on prisons?
Vasudha, thanks for raising that question. I think the plight of under trials is something that we must talk about continuously. Now, while we should explore alternatives, and it's not like they're not there already in the statute already, there are alternatives to incarceration, but are they being exercised like the way rejection of bail is exercised, if I may say? So, therefore, there is an under trial review commission, review committees which are supposed to do this monitoring and then recommend under trials eligible for bail, and then they are supposed to be released. We've done an analysis of that also over the last 5 to 6 years. And out of, let's say, 100 under trials who were recommended for release by the UTRCs, about 50% only are released. So I think there is a lot of scope to improve this decongest prisons, because as you may have seen in the report, we are also projecting just at current rates our prison population will touch close to 7 lakhs, while
Right.
our prison capacity will only be around 5. So this gap can only be filled. Well, one way is to increase capacity annually at the rate of about 20,000, or or rather, we should implement these measures that are already there to identify under trials, use more bail more judiciously, and therefore only send people who are a risk to public safety or are at the risk of flight.
Absolutely. Thank you, Valay, but do stay with us. Ms. Sundar, thank you so much for patiently waiting. Despite
Yes.
improvements, what we see is that women constitute only 14% of High Court judges, although women now comprise 38% of judges in district courts. There is a clear underrepresentation when it comes to higher courts. What are the systemic barriers, ma'am, to women reaching higher judiciary positions? How can they be addressed? Give us some personal experiences and suggestions that you think might work.
Thank you. I think, yes, it is a structural ceiling barrier that exists in almost every industry. I don't think the law is immune to that glass ceiling that exists. Structural barriers, I think, personally, the the profile of women lawyers is actually en masse lower than the profile of the really well performing male lawyers, if I might say so. And also, they tend to be in cases that do not receive the kind of public profile, or they don't seem to receive the kind of corporate profile that male lawyers receive. It also means that women lawyers do tend to take the back seat on some of the critical questions that come up. I'm not saying about every woman lawyer, but just that structurally it appears that politically sensitive cases, corporate sensitive corporate cases, cases that have to do with perhaps enforcement or areas that actually reach the newspapers do tend to be handled by higher profile male lawyers. I think that might be one reason. The other reason is just structural. I think there are fewer women in leadership positions across industries, and I think that that pattern continues in our industry as well. If we can treat it as an industry. It's also important to consider that while women lawyers are doing extremely well and they are coming up in the profession, I think when they come to the position of becoming high court judges, I think they are probably at a more senior level, and then their elevation to the Supreme Court becomes that much harder. And a fewer number of women lawyers are elevated to the to the High Court
Right.
at a younger age. I think that might be also a reason why we don't
That's
see
a very
high,
valid point.
larger
Mr.
number
Ravi
of women
Shankar,
lawyers.
I'm also repeating this question that I asked to both Valay and Vikas Singh. Why are southern states like Karnataka and Telangana consistently outperforming others in justice delivery? Karnataka also in terms of diversity, parameters. Telangana has had a significant gain, is what I understand, a jump in its, in its performance.
15 to 3.
Yes, what can lower ranked states like Uttar Pradesh or West Bengal learn from these top performers?
Firstly, I believe that sometimes some of these systems are very individual centric, in the sense that you have chief justices at some point in time who are very conscious of delivering numerical justice. Then there are judges who believe in giving you qualitative justice. So maybe a mix of all these things sometimes give you bizarre results. But having said that, I would believe, and from my very little experience of what I've seen across the country where I've gone and argued in court, Karnataka and Telangana certainly have a better legal environment, and there's a better understanding between the bar and the bench than I see in very many North Indian states, a few that I've been to.
Right.
Now, but a more critical question there would be, why is it that these states are performing? Are they really performing? Or are we seeing some kind of a misleading number? Now, I'm very happy that Telangana has moved from 13 to 3 and Karnataka is right there. But, it's as mythical as saying that Kerala is the most literate state in the country. With this numbers, do they really tell the story? For example, I'll give you. Suppose there are 5,000 cases, of which there are, say, 2,000 batch matters relating to some excise policy, which changed over 1.5 years. So, therefore, the Chief Justice says, call all these 1,500 cases, dismiss them one day, saying they've all become infractions. Now, this adds to the progress report.
Right.
Any analysis of looking at the progress report from numbers is like our typical school education.
Okay, that's a very important point. Balai Singh, closing remarks from you, sir, because I was also looking at the forward to this report, Justice Sanjay Kaul saying that public pressure is essential to perform, and something that's been bothering me is also the fact that this discourse around judiciary is clearly, understandably, on corrupt judges, also on misuse of laws, which also I feel is often disproportionate because, sometimes numbers are not really understood. How can, public pressure really help judiciary becoming more accountable, for our courts becoming more accessible? Do you think there is a solution in there?
Yeah. Very quickly, just responding to Mr. Ravi Chandra. Well, this is numbers that are not only about judiciary. These are numbers about 3 other pillars also, sir. So while cases may be cleared by clubbing them together and so on, but that's not the only parameter. There are whole that are measured for every state. So there is improvement by the state over a period of time that is perhaps more than other states. So I would really take of course, all engagement is good, and what you're saying, Vasudha, is that overall the issue is that we need to look at the system as a whole and not as judiciary, police, prisons, and legal aid. They have to work in tandem. There has to be constant monitoring, and thing I would say is that paralegal volunteers and the legal aid system is very severely poorly funded. Chief Justice have reiterated this. Our spending is just about nationally 7 rupees per capita on free legal aid, whereas the entire eligible population, if you really add it all up, it is of nearly 80% of India's population, as Chief Justice Sanjeev Khanna said quite recently.
Right.
If I can interrupt you for a second,
okay,
it will be interesting to see how much of that number percolates to courts at the lower level and courts at the higher level. Because in the High Court and Supreme Court, the Legal Services Committee works well. But when it comes to where they are badly needed, and look at the mirror image shows more than 50% of the population.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm completely out of time. Thank you so much for joining me on this broadcast. Clearly, some very insightful points raised by our panelists here, seeking comprehensive reforms in Indian judiciary to ensure justice is not just fast but also fair.